All right, good morning, everybody, or good afternoon, depending where you are. Welcome back to the Warrior Mindset and Motivation Podcast. My name is Eric Castillo, and we have special treat today. We have Marcus from the Mission 22 organization, and they're a really good company, folks. They really support veterans and really try to help them out, and they got a bunch of things going on and things that they're doing. Uh, I don't want to take away from too much of Marcus's thunder, as I want to let him talk about all the things that Mission 22 is doing and the new stuff they got going on. So go ahead, Marcus, take it away and let people know a little bit about you and what you're up to.
Definitely. Thanks for having me on today. Yeah, so I got into Mission 22 about a year ago. It was an interesting kind of transition point in my life where I finished up some active duty time. I was an engineer officer for about 4.5 years, stationed up in Fairbanks, Alaska, spent a little bit of time in Jay-Bear, Alaska, down in Anchorage, and was kind of trying to figure out where my skills and expertise fit in kind of on the civilian side. I had tried a couple of civilian jobs there in Central where I live now, and came across the Mission 22 team and kind of had my own realization that, you know what, like the thing that I need to do with my life is going to somewhere having to do with the military and that community. And while I'm still in the reserves today, I am a reserve officer out of Clackamas, Oregon, with a psychological operations unit. I met Magnus Johnson, who is the founder of Mission 22, with a group in Portland at one point. That's kind of another story. But I heard what he was getting up to, and at about the same time, I had discovered health coaching. So I got a health coaching certification a little over a year ago, and at about the same time, he had the idea for the program that we have launched back in September, which is called the Recovery and Resiliency Program. And this program in particular is it's sort of a condensation of the healing journey that Magnus took after he had deployed times and went through his own post-traumatic stress experience, and just all of the trials and tribulations that he went through to realize what could be done about veterans coming home, and why is it that so many veterans are taking their own lives after they're coming back from a deployment or finishing their time in the military. He found out, and where it really hit home for him was when one of his close friends was found to have taken his own life at one point. And so Magnus just had to ask the question, like, we have all these veterans charities, we've got the VA, what's missing exactly? Like, why is it that our nation's warriors are still having so much trouble, like getting back kind of integrated and using that warrior ethos within the context of something that's not within the military? So granted is the warrior's mission following the mission downrange. So one of the stories within the we talk about, and I'll kind of get into the details here in a moment, is the Iliad and the Odyssey, right? Like, those stories are kind of archetypal in the sense that they have persisted throughout time, which means that there's a lot of truth to them, in kind of like the meta-narrative sense. So what I mean by that is both of those stories, it describes a 10-year journey going to war, but then there's also a 10-year journey coming from war. And so it's that 10-year journey coming from war that is just not really there at all in our culture. I've talked to veterans before where they have been on the battlefield, like literally downrange with rifle in their hand 1 week, and a week later they fly through Fort Lewis or wherever, and it's like, okay, here's a quick out processing, or whatever. Like, there's just like no formal process of shifting. Go shop for groceries. Like, no, you can't expect that from someone. That's not reasonable. And unfortunately, the broader culture, as much as civilians want to like celebrate our veterans and have parades for them twice a year, Day and Memorial Day, it's not really getting it. And I think the nature of trauma is also taken for granted and not really understood. The Recovery and Resiliency Program, it's a path to show someone who has just returned from combat and or has maybe on the path been in a situation or other traumatic type situation within the context of the military, that, hey, you're not broken. You're not there's nothing wrong with you for having these symptoms as a result of a traumatic experience that you undertook on behalf of the country, right? So there's this idea of like, oh, you need to go to treatment, you need to be treated, you need to be cured because like, ooh, there's like something wrong with you, and there's this whole stigma around like, oh, you have post-traumatic stress. Like, well, thank you for your service. Have a good day. I don't know how to relate to you. But what we want to show through that veterans do have another journey to come back from. They have an opportunity through trauma experienced for the sake of our nation to learn more about them. One of the things we really want to get across is that it's precisely because of the trauma that you go through that you realize how much good can be done. So when part of the program is we have a health coaching component to it. So we are working on making a team of health coaches who have a better understanding of what we mean concept of moral injury. So moral injury is an idea that in the nature of trauma or post-traumatic stress, right? So we have like like this hypervigilant state. We have the fight or flight response is in high gear, like all of the it's really difficult to switch it off. And we can talk about the chemical flow that happens from the response to thinking that you're having like a flashback or something like that. You're kind of on guard and trying to keep yourself alive in a legitimately dangerous situation that happened a long time ago. But there is a component to that that's more, you can't really describe it in physiological terms. Like you can't account for the complexity of post-traumatic stress just by looking at someone's biology. Certainly the symptoms are manifest there, and finding well, I use air quotes cure because I'm not going to say that there's of healing is the cure itself. Because right, like if you have trauma, it's like a puncture wound, right? It never quite completely goes away.
Right.
There's all analogy of what happened with Frodo at Weathertop, right? And like my nerd side of me is coming out, but like he gets stabbed, right? And the rest of the story, it's like, oh, it never quite healed right. You know, that's it. It's like knowing that you're not gonna be cured. You can't go back, and there's no. But then why would you want to? Why would we go back to the way things were if this trauma is the thing that tells you who you are? Another illustration I like to use, it's like, have you ever people where if the conversation gets to a place where it's like, hey, do you have any like weird scars or something? And you show somebody like, oh yeah, this is where chainring on a bike once because I was being dumb about maintenance. Still got some grease there. You get like everybody else in the group suddenly wants to show you their scars. Like, oh yeah, look, it's like, but you know, it's like we know each other through our scars, you know, and it's almost as if I want you to see more of me showing you how I healed well from something that really, really hurt. And so that's kind of one way to frame trauma. Is it's something that we use to know ourselves and our place in the world far better. But that lesson, unfortunately, is lost in just in the mix of the soldier going through a process of like our military of training up, of getting deployed, and then suddenly they're just dropped back home, and they still have this open wound that they are able to heal from it. And you know, it's certainly not the individual's fault. I would say, you know, we are designed to work through these deals with the help of others. We're always designed to do that. Like by doing it by ourselves doesn't work, but we think that it's like people tend to those who have gone through trauma tend to isolate. And the reason for that is because in many circumstances, is that they don't want to be a burden on others. They don't want to have this sense of like, well, you know, I'm going to inconvenience them, and I just, you know, I'm supposed to be like a selfless server of, you know, like that's one of the warrior ethos is like tenets of the warrior ethos is selfless service. So if I'm sharing my problems with somebody else, you know, that's just a burden on them, and I don't want to trouble them. And could they really understand what I went through in the first place anyway? And you know, I don't want to tell them all the details maybe of what happened, but the reality is that, well, one, you don't necessarily have to share all the details. You just have to share, like, I need to be seen. And and it's not that we're trying to remove vulnerable, is kind of the first step to that healing and growth. What we are asking is you realize there's courage involved in this. It's a courageous act to ask for help, but it's also the way that you get to know yourself and know how your suffering can have real meaning. And as it turns out, that's actually the nature of many, many, like countless stories, from mythologies to modern stories. Like, how many times back to watch a superhero movie to watch the hero go through a time where they went through like a descent into the underworld where they lost everything. Then they found this new tool, and then they found a new appreciation of how to use that thing, discovered more of themselves, and then came back into society with a new gift to share. And unfortunately, the way our current military slash culture is set up is that it only does half of that, right? And so we kind of are trying to, through the Resiliency program, that there's another half, and it's one of the most beautiful possible things that someone could experience. And many civilians, I would say, go through life without really experienced, not that I would want them ever to experience, combat, because that's what those in the military are there for, is so that they don't. But the point is that without an encounter with the truest nature of humanity, which means seeing the dark underbelly of what's really there, you're still somewhat like uninitiated, right? Like the military and trauma can serve as some of the powerful forces to initiate a human being to make the most significant impact in the world. One of my favorite quotes from a psychologist: a good man or woman is not a dangerous man. Or, excuse me, a good man is not a tame man. A good man is a dangerous, has that under control. And so by experiencing things downrange, that by experiencing stuff that happens in combat, things that we want to put words to after it's over, we can then realize, like, oh, I could be that monster too. So I'm going to then turn inward and get control, and then turn it into, how can I help the community? One example of that with one of the individuals in the program, he was in a Ranger battalion as a combat, and he is in he does jujitsu in his local gym. And one of the things that they do there is they train law enforcement. And what this individual wanted to teach the law enforcement officers in the area who are training jujitsu is like, hey man, you're going to come across people who could fight 10 of you guys, and doesn't care how bad they get hurt. They don't care about you or your family, and they're going to fight in this way. And I know that because of my experience of kind of trauma and combat and just seeing the dark underbelly of humanity. But he used that to share it with the rest of the community. And now those police officers are served. Now the community is better served. And that's exactly like that person is on the path, right? And so that opportunity exists for every veteran. And that's what we want to teach.
And that's all amazing too, because that's something that I think that lacks in, well, these particularly in the armies. They, like people always say, even myself, they teach you how to go fight, but they don't teach you how to decompress and deal with trauma. And like how you talk about the dark underbelly, that's an interesting viewpoint, because I've never thought of it like that, and thinking of it in that fashion is actually neat. And when it comes to that point, like how you have that one ranger in your program, I think it's critical, because we all reach a point to where we can either go light or we can go dark, and it's a very critical, crucial point. And for me, during my transition, I went dark. I isolated. I got triggered by my ex-wife. I got arrested, and it wasn't until doing all of that, going through the Veterans Treatment Court program in Oregon, to where I realized that, you know what, I don't need to be ashamed of what I've done. I'm not this monster that was trained to kill. And I accept that for what happened, and then now turning it, like how you said, into what can I do to give back. And I think like a lot of veterans are in form of some sort of superheroes who are trying to give back, like people who are going through this process of, and it's like you mentioned with the superhero movies, like you got Thor, you got Iron Man, you got Captain America, you got all them with their stories, and you can watch their movies as they are kind of nothing. They go up, something traumatic happens, they fall down to the darkness, and then they have to refine themselves and prove their worth, basically. Like my favorite is Thor when he loses all of his powers because he gets so conceited, he gets so cocky and arrogant that Odin strips all his power from him and says, "You're not worthy of this." And basically he teaches him a lesson of, hey, you need to show that you're worthy to handle this, or if someone else comes along, they're going to have this. And it's an interesting transition because I compare that to veterans and even to like myself, because I almost had to prove that my self-worth again because I lost it. Not in the cocky, arrogant way, but just of the shame, the guilt, the anger, the fear, the depression, the sadness, even the isolation, not wanting to be a burden to other people. And I know that's a huge one. People got their own lives, and the last thing you want to do is add all of your problems on top of someone else. And I think breaking the stigma of that is saying, if they're your friend or they're your best friend or even your battle buddy, it won't matter because they'll drop whatever they're doing to help you because that's what they're there for. And it seems like you guys have created that missing link with this program, the Recovery and Resiliency program, that it's kind of like almost like that missing link. And a question about that is this your first round of people? Have you had multiple rounds of it already, or is this the first group of individuals you have?
Yeah, so right now, a cohort model where we have about 10 people per cohort. We are looking at starting our third cohort in the about the beginning, mid-January time frame. But we have 20 individuals right now going through it. So we're definitely still in the early days of this thing, but the feedback is really good so far. And it has been really fulfilling for me to be able to kind of see how each individual within the program, when they interact with each other, and like bulbs are going on, not because like I'm doing all this great teaching or mentorship or whatever. It's like I'm just kind of helping to create this environment, and then they kind of get together and find these solutions. And like I really believe that all of us deep down, like we know the right answer, right? If we ask the right questions to ourselves, we can find the right answer. More often than not, we really need that tribe that's going through the same thing, because I mean, God only knows the answers that you could get to when it's not just you asking yourself the questions. It's not just your health coach asking these questions, but it's your other it's your battle buddies who are currently with you, who are asking these things. And that's I think there's a lot of, like, there are many components to the program where we want to emphasize that when, like, healing from a moral injury has a lot to do with your nutrition, as it does with your physical health, health. And it's kind of hard to pinpoint what exactly it is that is like the magic of getting someone to a better place. And really it's an emergence of something else when you cohere all of these other things together, right? Like the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. And where I really see that is where these individuals are talking to one another. And it's just, it's not like you don't have the answer to their hurt, right? The answer is, and the answer to their process is speaking truth, right? And speaking truth can come in the form of learning how to meditate, which means you're meditating stillness, on peace, on joy, on gratitude. That's speaking the truth to yourself. You engage in a community gym, right? That's part of the program as well, as we give everyone a gym membership to something like an MMA or CrossFit Box or some other platform where they're engaging exercise with other people. That then helps with hormonal health, right? Like we all know, like a good weight session is fantastic for mental health, or a good, long, whatever, getting out in nature, like that. We don't need all of the science to tell us exactly how that works. the science is there if you want it, and I can tell it to you. But it's like the kind of chemical hormonal imbalances by getting plugged into community, by realizing that your nutrition links up with that, by realizing that if you have those two pillars, the relationships start to build. By getting a meditation practice going, you realize like there's more to me than just my biology. And when these things start to get together and aren't just siloed, but are in sort of this web, and someone can experience that firsthand. And oh, by the way, we also have devices that will show you in real time using heart rate variability metrics that your stress is objectively going down. It's not just that you're feeling better; you can see it too. You can like the issue is not with information, right? Like you can have whatever information you want. Like if you just go on Facebook, book recommendations on any topic, I guarantee you're going to get all sorts of responses. So it's not information; it's experiencing, I believe, to become a equally valued back home as you were downrange is not access to information. It's being in a place where you can let the facade down and share vulnerable. And that, like I said before, like that's an act of courage. It's not comfortable doing that, but it's in that discomfort or the medicine R&R where we want to provide the tools and the path to show you how that's done so that you can then go progress through that year-long program and learn with other
people. That's super awesome. And that also, I went through a program, not as long or similar. It's called Rush University. They're out of Chicago. It's a 4-week process, and I wish it was longer. But it's like the same thing. It pairs with 10, 11, 12 veterans, and they break you up into groups. And we actually got really close. And this was 2 years ago, and we still have a group text message where we talk to today. And we all shared our experiences. Like we would have our group sessions and we would talk, and there'd be times where the facilitator would be like, okay, we need to move on. And we'd be like, hey, no, we're not done yet. Like we're still talking here. So you're going to wait. And the director was like, oh, okay. Like, cause he was in the military also, but like how you talked about how the veterans, when you put us together, that's all of different types of branches coming up with the solution, because when it comes down to it, we will find the solution to a problem. And when you put a bunch of veterans in one room together and someone's having a problem, you best believe we're going to find the answer to it. It may take a little longer, it may take less, but we have that capability to think outside the box. And then now you have different thinking perspectives that you don't really think of. Like you have this viewpoint, but someone else sees something different. Someone else sees something different. So now you have 3 or 4 different vantage points on somebody who's struggling with something. And we shared tears in that room. We shared our war stories in that room. There was one time where we didn't do nothing but cry for almost 20 minutes because it was just, there was a lot, and it was a lot to release and a lot to let go of. And we shared our personal stuff, people going through relationship problems in there. We're not no experts in relationships, and Lord knows I wasn't at the time, but we tried to offer, hey, this is what we would like, this is what we think you should try if you want to try it. And it was really good, and we built a really, really close net. And I can only imagine the new relationships and friendships and bonds that are forged in this year-long recovery program that you have going. Now, with this program, do they actually stay there with you? Like, is there like a housing facility, or is it kind of like, how does that work?
So it's interesting. We actually didn't program really at all for all of the stay-at-home stuff going on. It's all done remote, with the exception of the gym. So the gym is kind of on them. Like we encourage them to go out and plug into their local community. That's kind of another thing too, is that while yes, there is a component to, like, many of your civilian neighbors will never know like anything close to what you went through. But that's kind of the point as being a warrior, right? You do it so that they don't have to. But with that, potentially, this isn't the case for everyone, but that can come with some level of resentment. Like, man, I don't need to deal with the civilian population. Like, what do they know? Like, they're never going to be able to relate. Like, they're trying to like celebrate the fact that I went to war. It's like one of the books by Edward Tick, War and the Soul, opponent of the program, talks a lot about how celebration of essentially like fighting a war is not quite the right response. It's what's the way to put it? Like, it's to engage in potential bloodshed, right? Like it's a we must face as a reality, but it's not necessarily something we ought to like cheer on. For example, Veterans, I think it was Veterans Day. It's either Veterans Day or Memorial Day. Memorial Day used to be called Armistice Day, right? Like that was the day that we celebrated peace and the cessation of war. But now it's almost like we're celebrating the act of self. Like what, so anyway, the point is like, we want to get them into a local community of perhaps a mix of both veterans and civilians. And if you do that in the context of getting after it in the gym and learning some jujitsu or Olympic lifting, then that's a really powerful way to combine all of the good benefits of exercise with knowing that you can do that with other people. But the rest of the program is really, it's online based, which actually is quite appropriate for the time we're in now. All of the health coaching stuff is online. The components of the program that are like the tools and the biometric devices, you can use all those just through apps. There is a online space that we have for like a forum where everybody can contribute to. It's like the group of 10, but it's mostly them talking to each other. The Mission 22 headquarters, eventually we want to have some more stuff that's like actually on the facility. Equine program, which is not the same as R&R, it's just another branch of what we do. But yeah, that's kind of what it looks like right now. It could change in the future, but that's where we're at.
That's awesome. And the fact that it's actually online remotely seems like it worked out to you guys' benefit too. Because I know the program I went to, they put you there. Like I didn't know that Chicago had like a medical district. So like in this little bubble had all your facilities. There was like hospitals, there was the VA, there was Rush, and all of it was right there. And they put you in this building that was key card entry because it was a part of Rush for 4 weeks. So the fact that like all this is online and remote and things like that it's kind of good because it kind of forces them to participate for like you can easily slip, but I can imagine that they're like, hey, are you doing this? Are you doing this? And it kind of pushes them to kind of do stuff on their own and kind of just recover. Like I think it's amazing the program and what you guys do and what you guys offer. And oh, I lost my place here. Oh, and I wanted to ask you a question. Like I know, just to kind of we talked about the program and to dial back, and I know you said you when you got into Mission 22, I wanted to touch back on that real quick, just so veterans can see that it's not really on who it's just being a little more social. Because if you're not social, then you might not have been where you're at today. So if you could just tap just a little bit, we don't need to go into too much, but just a little on how you actually got into Mission 22. Like I know you met Magnus, but like how did that spark? How did that come about to put you to where you're at today?
Yeah, it's an interesting story. So when I graduated from Auburn, I had an industrial engineer degree, and then I was an engineer for 4.5 years. And figured I was just destined in the civilian world to do something along the lines of engineering or project management, something like that. But like knew, like I was an endurance athlete for a while. I like to consider myself still in that realm. Another story. But I discovered this thing called health coach, and it's a pretty new vocation, and the whole health coaching industry is still kind of figuring itself out. But that is a vocation that kind of you talked about like links in the chain. That's the thing that links like say a functional medicine practitioner who appreciates the holistic approach to health only maybe once a month, and that would be on the high end. But how are they going to be accountable to those goals in between? And so that's where a health coach kind of comes in. That's one role a health coach can play. So anyway, I started out working with it's with the Primal Health Coach Institute. There are a couple of different institutions out there, but that's the one that I chose. And right at about the same time that I started that program, I met some guys out at a church retreat who were also from, and they were getting started with something called Element Fitness, which was essentially it was like a CrossFit group that also kind of did Bible study, something like that. And so I was really intrigued and just started talking to them, like, hey, I've started doing this health coach thing. I'm not really sure where I'm going with this, but I know it's something that I need to do. And so I started visiting Portland. I had lived in Central Oregon at the time. And when I visited over in Portland, and this was about my life when I was going through some relationship hell on my own end, and just really needed support and reached out to them. And I can some of my roughest days that summer, and this was just summer 2019, I met with this Element Fitness group in Portland, and we would do the most ridiculous workouts where you would be so sore the next day, but it was like you were tired and you earned it. And lo and behold, Magnus Johnson was part of that group. And so that's kind of how we so we kind of got a conversation going. He was mentoring those guys on how to grow and develop Element Fitness. And around frame, I so it was actually quite interesting. I had lost my job early September, and 5 minutes before I got the call from my former employer, I got my welcome kit to Primal Health. So it was I had to do like a double take of what was going on here. It was like my relationship was kind of falling apart. That my job had just fallen apart. I didn't know where I was going to be living. I'm glossing over details here, but those two things happened within literally 5 minutes. The thing came up, here's your welcome kit. You're now a health coach. I get the call, hey, you don't work for us anymore. So I was like, that's interesting. And so I went out on a limb, took a trip to Portland, and pitched to the Mission 22 team, like, hey, I started this health coaching business. I want to work with y'all. I don't know exactly what that would look like, but this seems like where I need to be. And then in November of last year, Magnus kind of had this idea of what R&R would look like, our new program. And he like, okay, this should include health coaching. And here I was, an Army officer, endurance athlete, someone who had kind of gone through the trauma of losing a marriage and some other stuff, not exactly combat trauma, but we can talk about how the nature of trauma is not really the event itself per se. But anyway, so all these things kind of came together. And so I ended up moving to Portland in early January to get started with the team and get this program kicked off. COVID happened, and then they back to Central Oregon to kind of develop this miniature ranch, I guess, which is where I work now. So yeah, that's kind of how I got involved. And I'm really excited to see where this is going and taking us. And I think it has just an enormous amount of potential, not just for kind of the veteran space, but really everyone. Like, suicide's up across the board, man. And we can start with our veterans and show that this is how we transmute the deepest pains we could go through into something meaningful. Like, how big could that get? Like, how much more could that message spread? Because what we have now is not working.
Right. And I actually wrote that down, like, with what's missing, because I know I went through that part. I almost I attempted suicide twice during that time when I was going through the divorce and the legal stuff. And it was so much noise in the head where it's so simple to slip to that space and you don't even realize it. And it's critical that one has a strong support network to kind of pull you out of that a little bit, because if not, then bad things can happen. And that just goes to show, like, with your story, that as much as introvert or antisocial a veteran that has a bunch of trauma like is, because I was there too, the moment that you get out and actually talk to someone, they can know someone that knows someone, or in your case, the guy who actually created all of this to kind of put you where you're at now. And I kind of see, like, your little situation as like a divine intervention, basically, all within 5 minutes, like, okay, you're done with all this, you're doing this now. And it was all like that. So I believe in that wholeheartedly, that, like, people have a purpose, and sometimes it'll be a slow process, or sometimes, well, now to even up the ante as quick as 5 minutes, like what happened for you.
Yeah. And I do believe this, that no matter like things can get dark. And like trauma is real, you know, like it's rough out there. Let's not, you know, mince words here. But I believe that no matter how dark it is, like there's always something. There's always something if you choose to look for it, right? And it can be hard to, like, fair point. It can be hard to find, but it is always there. I'm reading through Alexander Solzhenitsyn's account of the Gulag, right? Probably the darkest hours in all of human history, and yet he was able to recount that and put it to words, and it led to, well, in part, obviously some other history there, but like it had an enormous positive impact at the end of the day on what seemed like a completely and totally hopeless situation. So that would be one thing I would say as well. If anyone's listening that is seeking and trying to figure out like why is it that I feel lonely when I'm surrounded by friends and family? I have a job but don't feel like I have purpose. Why is it that I don't have any desire to get up out of bed in the morning, or feel sorry for myself all the time, or whatever the case is? Like, if we decide that we're going to take responsibility for the tragedy of so much of human life, that is where we can do something along the lines of creating more heaven out of the hell that is part of this world.
That's awesome. I think that's like an amazing closing message too, because I was just about to ask you, well, what would you like to put out there as a message? And I think that's perfect. And one thing that I kind of created myself is I also like to say life is like a battery. You need a positive and a negative in order for it to work. You don't see any battery that's just fully positive or fully negative, because it doesn't go. It's dead. You know, and that's you. If you choose the negative, you're dead. Even too much positivity, you know, you can have a lot of positivity, but then at what point does it become fake positivity, or now you're just going through the motions? So you have to have that healthy balance, because in the dark times, in the negative and bad times, that's when you learn. That's when you're tested and you learn more about yourself. You learn more about what you can handle and what you can take. So if you're going through a tough time right now, guys and gals, it's because you're supposed to go through it, because they're trying to teach you something. You know, there's a lesson to be learned and something to be taught. And sometimes you just got to take a step back and look at what am I trying to be taught right now? What do I need to learn? Because that's how we develop experience. That's how we grow. And especially for, you know, when you got a guy who deploys to combat, it's been his 4th tour versus the one, they're going to go to the guy with the 4th tour because he's got the experience. He's been through the hell. He's been through the mess. So he knows. So it's a plus and minus, and it's a healthy balance of, you know, and it's still hard to not let one scale tip too much. Like, and of course we would like the positive scale just to tip a little more. But again, if you revert it to a battery, if it's too much, it ain't gonna work, you know, because you need that negative in order to learn and develop experience.
Yeah, I like that analogy. And the pursuit of trying to make a life that's totally free from conflict is pursuing a life that humans weren't meant to live. Humans are meant to carry a load. We're load-bearing creatures, and in that's where we find meaning. It's not in trying to find comfort. It's not in trying to avoid. It's by climbing that mountain. Like, one of the analogy I like that's along the same lines as the battery, which I might use that later. Haven't heard that one before, but is like if you consider like a really tall mountain at the peak, there's no life, right? Too high of elevation. There's like basically nothing there, no vegetation. It's gray, it's rocky. You get there and you're all so, but the peak must be part of the equation in order to have life on the slopes.
That's a good one. I like that. That's a good one. I haven't heard of that one either. Well, see, now look at that. You can use mine, I can use yours, and then we're good there. We can share those.
All right.
Sweet. So
yeah, that's great.
We'll go ahead and we'll wrap up this today. I want to thank you for coming on and talking and spreading the message with Mission 22. I have been looking at you guys' stuff for a while. I follow you guys' Facebook page and things, and I like to share what you guys promote, and I definitely will be sharing more of this stuff because you guys are out there trying to make a difference. And you know, it's the what's missing, and it's organizations like Mission 22 that's trying to fill that hole of what's missing, and we'll get there. I mean, we'll get there. It just, once we find the right fit and it gets the right traction and momentum, it'll pan out and it'll start helping, and then we'll get veterans that need the help. So I appreciate you for coming on, and thanks.
Yeah, anytime. I'm love.
Sweet. All right. Well, thank you everybody for tuning in and watching. Catch me next week as I have another special treat for you. You know, every week is special with everybody who I talk to, but some have they all provide different angles and viewpoints. So just tune in. Wait, hold on. Is next week the Christmas? Nope, next week is not Christmas. Okay. No, I just wanted to make sure, because I'm not doing nothing on Christmas. I'm gonna give everybody a break on that day.
Yeah, I'm behind on my Christmas.
Yeah. Thursday falls on Christmas, so I give everybody a break. It'll be Christmas Eve and things. Maybe I'll come on there by myself. But next week I got a special treat for you. I'm working with someone who I used to work with. He was my platoon sergeant. He's a very awesome dude, and we're working out some details, and so that we can give some good content to you. But again, Marcus, thank you for coming on, and I hope you have a good time over there with your family and the holidays and things like that.
All right, thanks a lot, Eric. We'll see you.
Take it easy, everybody.